The food service, hospitality, and retail industries are evolving in ways you've never heard of until now. Hosted by global industry technovator Rob Grimes and powered by the IFBTA, TechBytes is your go-to podcast, putting technology innovation and trends on the menu.
So welcome to TechBytes, and as usual, we're going to have an industry conversation. I like to think about it as I should say in your case, maybe a burger or a coffee conversation. But I'm really pleased to have Kris Douglas join us today. And not only is he the Vice President of Technology at Small Sliders, but he's also the co-chair of the IFBTA's Atlanta chapter. So welcome on to, we've had conversations before, but never on TechBytes. So welcome to TechBytes.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
I think not everybody is aware of who Small Sliders is. So why don't we just start there and just give the introduction both to Small Sliders and also your background?
Sure. So Smalls is a bespoke cheeseburger slider business that started in 2019, and we're taking the industry by storm. If you haven't heard about us yet, you will hear shortly. We sell the best cheeseburgers.
Some big announcement that you want to make here?
No. The best cheeseburger slider that you may have not had. Right, we're expanding. We're on a rapid pace to expand across the nation. We're currently in multiple states, and hopefully we'll be here in 22 states by the end of the year. We have 47 locations today, and we're looking to grow. So it's been a fun ride.
Are you in?
Right now, we're in 12 states today.
12 states and 47 units.
Yes.
Okay. And so you're looking to go to 20. How many states did you say you're looking to go to? 22?
We're looking to go to 22.
Okay. So that's a lot of rapid growth. And it's for somebody starting in 2019, that's a lot as well. And your background, how long have you been there?
I've been at Smalls now for almost 3 years. I joined in May of 2023.
And before that, you were over at Inspire,
yes.
Which I think is where we all first met. And what I didn't know about you, and I should just not be surprised that you also had a history with Coke and CNN, a lot of Atlanta companies as well. I was sort of curious about that, by the way, what you did at CNN and also how you ended up in the restaurant business.
Yeah, it's actually pretty interesting. I think I tell people all the time that I think I fell into this space, and it's been like one of the best career decisions for me. My background is very diverse. I actually started my career in healthcare. So I started in healthcare for the first 10 years, and it was specifically predominantly in medical device and diagnostics, but all in technology. So technology to support manufacturing and distribution of medical devices. And then from there, when I moved to Atlanta, I actually started at CNN. And while I was there, I supported their mobile device management and their platforms as we were thinking of streaming. So they
didn't have you in front of the camera like we are.
No, not in front of the camera.
In front of the camera, right? So you were behind.
I was behind the camera. I was behind the camera. I didn't make the cut to get in front of it. But it was a good transition for me to go from one industry that's heavily regulated and focuses on patient care and efficacy to something completely different. And it was on the cutting edge because at this point in time, mobile devices and streaming were a big thing. So it got me on the front line of that. So I spent some time there, and then post CNN, I did some traditional consulting at E&Y, and then from there, Coca-Cola, and then that's how I got my avenue into the food space with Inspire.
So, you said that you sort of fell into it. Sounds to me like you slid into it.
Yeah, I slid right into it. Yep, for sure.
Yeah. So that's a better thing. So, as you take a look at it, you went from a really big company, at Inspire, into this. How do you make that transition? And, having spent that amount of time, and what's the difference of working in a smaller entrepreneurial, not that Inspire is not entrepreneurial, mm-hmm. but, how's it feel? And what are the differences you see when you're going from one to the other?
Yeah, the differences are predominantly around building something from the ground up, right? And what I mean by that is at Inspire, you're building, you're innovating, but you're centralizing a lot of capabilities. You're basically stitching everything together. You're acquiring brands. How do we make them work? How do we identify areas of opportunity? And then how do we optimize capability to scale across multiple brands? At Smalls, it's a kind of an inverted concept where you're building from the ground up. And what do we build that's going to be unique for Smalls? It's going to allow us to scale in the best manner and the way we treat our customers and guests. So it's a different problem to solve, but it's been a great journey. And you have to have a builder mindset and an entrepreneurial mindset and want to build things to be in an area like this.
Well, people always have that conversation, especially when people are IT people and they like to tinker or build.
Mhm.
So, do you have a particular method? Do you look to build your own custom? Are you off the shelf? Are you thinking, all in one versus, best of breed? Is there a strategy that Smalls and under you is following?
Yeah, I would say a faithful pragmatist. So I like to approach it through a learning mindset and a learning lens. So as I'm building, I want to establish things that are going to allow us to hit scale on our growth journey, but then constantly evaluate like what are going to be the opportunities where we can become niche and really over index on capability. So I look at it in cycles. So as you're growing, you need to have enterprise wide technology that can be somewhat off the shelf that can help you grow and scale to meet that demand. But then as you grow, like, how do I learn from this? Does this work? Does this help me meet my need? Is there things that are really important to Smalls that this platform or capability doesn't provide that we can either A, add to it, or do we need to pivot? So it's a constant state of evaluation, and you look at it in different like growth intervals. Like, hey, once we hit 50, where are we looking like now? What do we assess? How are we growing? As we get to 300, 400, what do we need to change? And ultimately to help us fuel where we aspire to be, which is over 1,000 locations, 2,000, 3,000. What does that look like, and what technology we need once we get to that level?
Well, also you face the challenges that you did when you were over at Inspire, a franchisee, franchisor, when you're doing the growth, but also if you start, putting in there, things like international, which, sooner or later comes up. So if you're putting those building blocks in place now, for that growth, which is basically what you said you walked into, that really makes, a difference. So if I could put you on the spot and, so the state of tech at Small Slider when you came in, was it something you walked in that really was looking to be built? Or was it something that you were building upon?
Mhm. It was definitely the former, looking to be built. When I joined Smalls, we had less than 10 locations. So we were really looking to establish like foundational enterprise capability was like goal number one. How do we scale? Like, how do we grow and scale in a very conducive and meaningful way? So applying like intentionality around what tools and what different capabilities we were going to select was like goal number one. And it really is around supporting our growth journey and aspirations. But then as we're growing, now we're hitting that next interval of like, well, what's going to be best in class for Small? So as we establish our foundation, what do we start to then innovate on? What can we think about differently? And what are we learning as we grow? Because we were heavily saturated in the Baton Rouge area and DMA, but now
That
we're
where
going
it
to different.
started,
Yeah, that's where it started in
and
Baton
then
Rouge,
you ended up in
Louisiana.
Atlanta.
Correct. So now we're learning. We're learning as we open different locations. We're learning from different customer bases. We're learning about how technology performs. So as we're learning, like what do we do with these learnings? How do we interpret them? And then what could be a differentiator for us?
You're talking about coming into an environment. So, what were the key things? Is there a prioritization? How do you go, about it if you're really looking to build here? And by the way, going from 10 units, to 40, is a big step. And then to go to 1,000 units or multi-state, those and multiple franchises, that really starts to uh, create a lot of challenges in there. So how did you prioritize or what did you prioritize as far as, how you were going to build it?
I started with essentially like the foundation, like what's critical to allow us to grow. Like a lot of like what I would say the basic things, right? If you're standing up a mom and pops kind of restaurant location, you can do things a little bit unique and or boutique for you. But when you're thinking of growth and scale, it's like, how do I put that enterprise capability there and focusing on what do we need to run the cans? What do we need to run this business and building that? But that in addition to that, as you're growing all the capability inside the locations, it's also what do we need as an enterprise and as a company to scale and support that growth. So you're building essentially both of them in unison. So that's kind of how I started is what is required both inside of the locations and what is required for us as a business to grow and scale. And as an example is how do we think about data? How do we treat data? Because data is key for us and how we make decisions. So as we're putting in these capabilities, how do we ensure that we can get the data and insights from them so we can continue to learn?
When you're moving forward, you know, do you have a view of best of breed? Because you could have started from anywhere, right? So do you have a best of breed versus all in one kind of approach when you're a smaller but growing unit?
Yes. So for me, I'm more of a best in breed approach versus all in one. And I know there's two schools of thoughts. All in one allows you to have a single source of truth, one platform that can do many things. But I look to establish like best in breed capability across an array of areas so that as we're doing it, we're getting the most value out of the technology. And then we're also learning like, how do smalls operate effectively? So having best in breed technology typically offers you more robust capability. So we're able to then leverage those, index on those, learn, try, iterate, be nimble, or it's kind of how I think through it.
Do you think that there's, I was just sort of thinking about as the question came out and you were making the answer, I'm thinking about this, like, is there really such a thing today as best of breed versus all in one? Because even those who would have an all in one, are going to have, 100 plus integrations,
Yeah.
especially if they're working with, enterprise, even small enterprise or large SMB up. So I don't know that, and it's going to be seamless and it's going to be
Mhm.
native. I think the idea of, somebody telling you, here's the API, go right to this or something, that really doesn't happen that much anymore
Right.
unless you're going to test something, unless you want to be. So maybe there is no best of breed versus all in one really anymore.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a subjective opinion of what best in breed is nowadays, and I also think it's evolving because as platforms mature, they're adding capability, right? So everybody may start in a specific vertical or segment, but then over time they'll get more mature, they'll get more robust, and they'll add a capability to their platform that they may have not had. So we're seeing those lines kind of blur and converge a little bit. But as a technologist and as you're solutioning for your business, you have to determine what is critical and important to me and be grounded in that, and then go out there and secure those solutions that are going to provide those benefits for you.
So if you've prioritized and you've put the building blocks in place, so in that order, or what are the objectives or the things that are lying in front of you for this year and then for the next couple of years as far as now expanding and taking it forward?
I think for me, I'll theme the year from a technology vantage point for us, and it's one of like what I'll call deep learning. And what I mean by that is, initially when I joined Smalls, the focus was really on enterprise capability and foundation. Like, what is our foundation? How do we build it? How do we scale? And I think throughout my tenure in the beginning of the year and the first couple of years that we've been working on it, we're fortifying that, right? So the foundation is being put in place, and it's getting basically fortified across the system. Now it's about like learning. So over this next juncture, how do we learn? How do we evolve? What's going to be different? What's unique to
So are you
small?
investing in tools in that?
We are investing in tools in that. We're looking at all tools that can provide data. So we have a CDP that we use to make sure that we get our customer insights. We have a loyalty platform that we leverage. And then we're also thinking, how do we aggregate all this information via data warehouse capabilities? How do we get insights out of that? So it's really focusing in on the customer journey, that information and data that will allow us to make prudent decisions as we get into that next
So,
10-year
so I'm
road.
sort of thinking about how that frames up, right? Because a lot of people talk about the data, they talk about the analytics, they talk about the learnings that are there, the insights, that they're able to get, and there's many different opinions on that. So if we were to break that down, it sounds like something that your leadership and your management team certainly embrace.
Mhm.
Um, how does that impact, a franchisee? How does that impact the people at the stores? Are they all part of that same journey? Are they embracing it, or is it something you have to teach them?
I think it's an embraced logic because everybody wants to be data driven and understand how are we performing and how do we do better ultimately, right? And you just look at it in different lenses. One from a franchisee lens, which is probably very traditional around sales, traffic, transactions, those type of things are how you look at it. But then even beyond that, what is the persona of our customer? How does that evolve? How do those things change? And that's information that once we're able to arm it to our franchisees, they can perform differently. They can curate specific local marketing
You have to
campaigns.
teach them,
Yeah,
or do
it's
you
it's a
think they
partnership.
intuitively know what to do because of all the applications now around them?
I think it's a partnership, and I think it's a key partnership as you're growing a business. You have to have that ability to connect, conversate, and collaborate around, hey, this is what we're seeing. This is how we perform. Here's some tricks and tools that you can use at your disposal so that you can run the best smalls and you can have the best business. So it does provide an opportunity for us to collaborate very intimately, and then it has to be something you lean into. It's not a situation where you could say, hey, here's your business, go run it. We have to work together on the journey.
And so my guess is that you and the organization view the technology as an asset when they're out there trying to sell, new franchisees or open up new territories versus when you're dealing with a very large organization that may acquire, you end up with a lot of legacy systems, which really is not, the issue for you.
Yeah, yeah. Not It's not the issue for us, and technology for us right now is so critical. It's vital in our journey because we are growing. So we need to be able to support all the systems and how we are going to execute our business. So it's a critical component of how we grow. But then I think it's over time it's going to become a strategic differentiator. Like how do we engage? How do we communicate? And how do we show up to our customers? So I think that will be the next.
You mean that having the best sliders around is not the strategic differentiator?
It is that is the
And
strategic
the
differentiator.
technology, right?
Yeah, that is the strategic differentiator and the hallmark of who Smalls is. I think going forward, I think technology will start to manifest in a different way where it can provide some other capabilities and some insights into different areas.
Well, we've got a good background now on where you're coming from, where you're headed here. So why don't we just take a quick break? And I'm with Kris Douglas, who is I don't know which title to give you first, the chapter co-chair for the IFBTA in Atlanta or vice president of technology at Small Sliders. But let's just take a quick break and then we'll resume the conversation right after that.
With the rapid expansion of technology in the food and beverage industries, finding the right supplier can become overwhelming and complicated. To simplify this process, the IFBTA created Exchange. Exchange is a powerful search tool where users can easily narrow down their technology search and refine results by application type, geography served, department, and more. Browse resources and learn more about the industry's technology suppliers at exchange.ifbta.org. Now, back to the show.
So welcome back to TechBytes, and I'm really pleased to be having a conversation with Kris Douglas, who is the Vice President of Technology for Small Sliders, but also the Atlanta chapter of the IFBTA co-chair. So right before the break, we were talking about sort of embracing technology and where it fits within the organization, and we covered the high growth of Small Sliders and just also being able to do a best of breed approach, and how they're focusing on the future with the data. But we were talking about embracing technology. So what I'd like to do is maybe just sort of take take the right lane in the road and go off on the side. In your role of a co-chair of a chapter of the IFBTA, you're also a discussion leader, and I got the chance to sit in on a discussion last year. What are your observations? Because you're sitting with your peers, and other organizations and the vendors as well. So what are your observations as to how the technology environment has changed over the last few years, perhaps, and how are others embracing technology, and what are the key things that they want to talk about?
Yeah, I think over the past few years, it's been a very interesting space, especially for us in this industry with technology. And it was all, I think, something that was crystallized via the pandemic, right? So once we had that situation with COVID occur, it kind of thrust technology into the forefront of everyone's conversation. And how do we serve our business in this type of a dynamic? And I think from then, we've noticed a proliferation of different technology and tools all around. How do we become tech forward? How do we advance? And how do we really accelerate the business? And I think we're in this unique period now where we're assessing what is the effects of that, and what is essentially the value that we're able to achieve, and are we meeting our expectations? So I think that we're all kind of normalizing through that as an industry, and then figuring out, all right, well, what's going to be that solution for us as it pertains to each of our businesses, as it pertains to how we navigate this industry that can again contribute value to the space.
Well, as you have your chapter meetings coming up, and as the industry, I always call it, sort of March madness, but it's really April madness between the 6 weeks of all of these industry events, from the pizza show to the bar and restaurant show to MERTEC, then over in the UK for us, and restaurant leadership. I mean, you have all of these different events occurring within a 6-week period of time. Even before the National Restaurant Show and high tech for the hotel industry. So it seems that at all these conversations, at those conferences, the subject matter and actually the exhibitors, are tending to be more and more tech,
Yep.
That are out there. So as you go into March Madness, what are you expecting that the conversation is going to be? What are those subjects going to be? I mean, I see some of them, but What are you expecting that people are going to want to talk about, around the table?
I think people are going to want to talk about around the table a lot around, traffic, sales, those type of conversations are going to be big because as an industry through the macroeconomic cultures and things that we're experiencing, I think everyone's going to be thinking about how do we address those and what can we do to either give us better visibility and or allow us to reach customers differently. I think loyalty will also always be a big play around navigating loyalty and communicating to your loyal guests and your customers. And I think data is also going to be a key indicator of what we do. I think recently, prior to this year, a lot of it was focused on AI. And I think AI is always going to be an evergreen topic for us as we navigate this space. But I think it's going to be thinking of different applications of AI and how to use it differently versus what we've been doing recently around like drive-through, things of that nature, where we do leverage it. But what are some other use cases we can explore with AI
So
as
that's
well?
interesting because I was sort of setting you up, but you brought it up, and I was going to bring it up as soon as you finished there about the AI subject because I found it interesting that the whole conversation was not about that, and you didn't bring it up. But when you brought it up, you actually brought it up about what they were talking about last year, and
Mhm.
so it seems that, and this would be my perception as well, that we've made a shift from talking about the technology now to more of just assuming it's there. So now what are we going to do with it? And so
Mhm.
you're back to looking, as you said, at data. Loyalty is interesting because loyalty, while it's out there, hasn't been a huge subject over the last couple of years. I'm not sure why.
Mhm.
Is there some shift in loyalty that you see, going on as to why you believe that that will be, one of the key subjects?
Yeah, I think it'll be a key subject because I think people are looking for engagement, right? And how do we engage with our customers, right? Because as things shift, as the demographics shift, as we get different customers coming to experience our brands, how do we retain that relationship and propel it forward? And I think on the prior years, it was all loyalty. Everybody loyalty. What are we doing with loyalty? So everybody was putting in loyalty platforms. And then since then, it's been like, okay, now we have this loyalty base. How do we reach them? Then we went through a period of time where people were thinking, all right, we have loyalty. What else can we do? What else can we do? So we started solutioning around it. I think now that we've had this proliferation of technologies, more so kind of getting back to how do we reach people? How do we engage? We've deployed a lot of technology that removed human interaction in different locations. How do we start to build that back so people can have a differentiated experience
So
at
are
our
you are you using technologies that are removing what traditionally was human interaction within
We
your
are not.
company?
We are not today, but that was a big conversation for us as an industry previously. Is how do we do things differently and use AI to potentially pull labor out of locations, labor out of restaurants, and then now we're thinking, from my perspective, as we move forward, how do we continue to retain that human
So
interaction?
back of the house to operate more effectively.
Correct.
So there's an interesting analogy to that as I start to think about it, because the other subject, maybe prior to AI, was robotics.
Hmm.
And I'm trying to lay this out like in a timeline here. And I am thinking it was robotics. At one point it had to do with delivery and autonomous vehicles, but that really didn't make it because that went by the wayside for a period of time. And,
Yep.
so you think about what people's subjects are, but they were all talking about robotics and how that's going to replace labor, right? Now we
Yep.
talk about AI as how it's going to replace labor, right? And what I came to conclusion is that the robotics piece is out there. And will there be robotics in front of people? Sure, at some point. But where most of it has occurred is in the back of the house. Denny's with the robotic dish machine,
Yep.
and robotics pizzas and all these other types of things that are robotics. So if you think about it, where you're talking about using the AI portion, and the interaction for the guest is actually behind the house, still not necessarily in front of the house. While some people are talking about, are we going to go ahead and have the AI talk to you at the drive-through? And there's
Yep.
some people we've had on here that did that, or on the kiosk, or
Yep.
take your call and your reservation. Maybe the
Mhm.
hotel guys and the airline people will lead the way with that, and then we'll eventually put it in. But you're sort of following the same piece that you're going to use it in the back of the house.
Mhm.
And then at some point, it does come in front of the customer. So I'm not sure when some point is.
Correct. Correct. And my belief is that we are in the people business, right? So we're in the hospitality industry. We're in the hospitality business. We service customers, guests, and loyal patrons of our restaurants. So you don't want to sacrifice that relationship. And I think that's where one of the areas for me, as we think about advancing technology, is really around how do we create operational efficiency and effectiveness using tools versus intercepting or interpeting with that relationship, especially in a growing business and a growing concept, right? We need to maintain that as we continue to scale, and then figure out like how do we optimize for curating that experience.
So you know what? One of the challenges that I see, out there today is this word native tools.
Hmm.
And we all go through it. I mean, I go through it when I take a look at what am I going to connect to an ERP,
Hmm.
and I'll sit there and I go, what's your native connections? And then they'll tell me, and then my next question is, can I sign that contract with you, or do I have to go to a different division in your same company because you own the other tools that are there? But
Hmm.
and as soon as they say you got to go sign it somewhere else, I sit there and I go, I have this feeling that it's not going to be native, that it's plug and play, right? So I have the same problem when I deal with the data analytics and I use I must have subscribed now, to the $20 a month plan for three different, maybe four different AIs. And then I use up the data and I start doing voice with it because I like
Yep.
talking to it. And goes to 200 a month. And that's a lot of plans that I'm spending on this. And it's because no one tool today
Mm.
is seamless and there is no standard application. It sort of reminds me of like, what operating platforms are you going to, be on?
Yep.
It's same thing. I mean, what's your view on, are you going through the same thing personally or as a company?
Hmm. We're not going through that specifically because we're just coming out of our foundational kind of foray of building our tech stack. But I do see it prevalent in the industry where there's a lot of capability that are what I would say niche that you have to go procure, and it's like a lot of bolt-ons, and that we're all trying to solve for like hyper innovation that creates. I wouldn't say necessarily friction, but it requires a very thoughtful way on how do we get it all integrated, right? Which requires
It
not
is
only
friction.
huh?
Frictionless
Yeah.
was one of those terms at the end of last year that was going to be a term for this year. This
Yeah.
year, as you did applications, was
Yep.
frictionless, right?
Right.
So engagement, I think that's obviously people want to be more engaged, which is probably why you're bringing up also coming back to looking at how the loyalty apps are in fact being used.
Correct. Yep. How are the loyalty apps used, and does that still resonate with your customer and your consumer base? And how do you think about it differently as a business, right? So it's really about reach and engagement from that perspective. And then from a technology vantage point is being very intentional about what we're deploying, right? Not necessarily chasing the snowflake in the sun of we're going to get this one thing that's going to shift the entire business, but what are going to be tried and true things that are going to allow us to effectively service those relationships so that we can then figure out what is the real innovation play
Yeah,
for
and
us.
you don't have all the money in the world, right? So
Correct.
time, money, resources, right? So you got to work smart,
Correct.
on what you guys are investing in and what that return on investment. So how do you measure the return on investment, for the technology spend within your organization?
I think it's really around performance and growth from my perspective. Performance, is this technology performing the way it is intended? Is it providing the value and return for us on a business sense? Are we be able to operationally leverage it to run our business? And then B, is it also going to be something that we can use strategically in the future, right? Are they partners? Are we having those roadmap conversations? Are we going to be able to expand not just what we have today, but where we can leverage it to charter for us in the future? Are they thinking about technology and advancement and innovation as a partner? That's also a critical component, right? Like where's their thought process? Where's their mindset?
Mhm.
Because you want to be with someone that's not necessarily just responsive to what your need is. Are they predicting and forecasting our need for us and bringing solutions to the table that we can then collaborate on?
So if we're so just if we're just thinking ahead to March Madness and 6 weeks of shows and conferences, of which I'll probably see at least three of them. Um, when you go to these things, it isn't just a chance to go out to Arizona or to go to Las Vegas. I don't think, so it isn't just that. What is it that you are going to go that's going to give you personally take home value for you and the company?
Mhm. I think for me, the big value is seeing the shifts in industry and how people are thinking of technology. I think ultimately, as you assess, like as a business performance and growth, I think a lot of us are all focused on similar things. It's really giving you an upfront and intimate view of how are our partners thinking about it. How are they solving for these things? And then how are they being, I guess, moving in a different manner around innovation and what they could do differently? I think those are the key things for me, so that as I am constantly every day living and breathing our tech stack, thinking through who's thinking of some problems that we may have not encountered today, but I can kind of foresee in the future, that I can start to collaborate with and have conversations around. So I think that's the key for me.
So if I once did an episode a long time ago. I might do it again sometime. I called it sort of tech peeves,
Mm-hmm.
that were just the things that just annoy you that you just wish would just happen. Is there something that you think you just wish would happen for our industry and technology that for some reason we just aren't? And it could be general, tech that impacts us or something. But do you have some tech peeves out there that you just don't understand why we can't just do something? Of course, if you answer this question, you're probably going to get a dozen people that will write you a note and say, well, we have that solution. But okay.
Yeah, I definitely, and I would say one of my this is going to be interesting. One of my tech peeves are the solutions for the solutions we don't need, right? Like, so what I mean by that is we get inundated with calls. Hey, I have the solution for you, the solution for you, and I think one of the peeves is you have to know my business and how I think to understand what kind of solutions would be best for me to offer a solution, right? So I think like those are the things that are where we can become distracted in some of those conversations. I think it's not a peeve, but it's something that I actually really appreciate is that the evolution of technology. I love the fact that technology is never the same and it continuously evolves over time. So it's not a peeve. It's actually, I think it's like the glue, and it's the attractiveness that whatever solution you're using today over its life cycle is going to mature and change, and it gives us an opportunity to influence that decision. So that's an area that I love to participate in, and not necessarily be having conversations or sold on, hey, I have this new thing, you should get it,
Well, a
come
lot
buy
of
it.
people do, there always is that thing that people would develop technology for technology's sake.
Mhm.
It used to annoy me when I was in the business of doing RFPs and talking to people, how many people never went to the unit that they were trying to sell, when
Correct.
they came out to see if it really worked. But generally, I won't discount any technology today. When I talk to people who come up with something and they say, "Hey, we'd like to tell you, but can you look at it?" One of the questions I always ask them is, what motivated you to do this, or what was the need that you saw, especially when it's somebody who wasn't in the industry for a while.
Hmm.
Doesn't mean they didn't come up with a good idea, but it's interesting to find out what their motivation was, that gave them that idea,
Yeah.
to create something, right?
Hmm. Yeah, it is interesting, and it usually comes out of a problem that they have encountered. That they said, "Hey, this isn't something that's just isolated to me. There are multiple people and multiple businesses that have this problem. So let's build that solution." And typically, the most reliable and effective technology comes out of those problem scenarios. So I do appreciate that, and I'm also a consummate learner. Like, I love to learn about what's going on. I do it like. I do appreciate understanding people's technology platforms as yourself and what drew them to build it, but then also how do they think about it, right? Because problems always evolve, like just like people. So, what are you thinking about? What's the
Yeah,
next gen of
so
your problem?
sometimes people start out with, I was sitting on a bar and the bartender said, we really need this. And I'm
Yep,
like, okay, so how many bartenders? And by the way, did you like look online to see if that existed? But
yep,
sometimes they come up with like a really cool idea, and what it takes is to partner them with somebody else.
correct.
And you sit there and you go, that'd be actually work out if they had what you have, it's a great idea. And then when you see people developing tech from outside the industry, ex people that work for one of the tech companies, that's very interesting. Um, so it's very good to find out what their motivation and what gave them the idea, and not to discount, what it is, because it is a lot easier today to integrate and try something than it used to be. So
Yep.
I suppose that's out there. So is there on the personal tech side, since we're into February now, CES is behind us and stuff. You didn't go to CES, did you?
No, I did
Yeah.
not. I did
Yeah,
not.
so I went for a day. Yeah, that was a challenging day. You can't do it in a day. But is there something personally that you're looking to add to your home or personal tech stack this year?
I think for my personal tech stack, it's nothing I would say that I'm looking to add capability wise. It's really, I'm really looking to over index and assess like how it's performing. Like, I really want to see that value and understand the optimization opportunities for it, and start to predict and think through what's going to be the next gen of where we evolve to in the future. I always try to be at least 2 to 3 years out of trying to solve a problem. So that's where I'm at now. So really, like we were talking about earlier, I'm in the state of deep learning and deep thinking of understanding what we built into performance so that we can then figure out what do we over index on and really add some more momentum against. And then where are opportunities that we may have gaps that we haven't seen before that we can then close. I think
it
that's
really is a mind shift. I mean,
Yeah.
you really have to shift your mind because, I am now using the tools all the time, but I have to tell myself to do it. Hey, I'm about to embark and go do this. Why don't I just give that a try and see what happens?
Yeah.
And it's just constantly opening up new things. So one thing is clear to me is that if you had tried out for that CNN, broadcasting part, you probably would have gotten it. So, you never know. You might you're in Atlanta, so you might end up, finding out that at some point they need you back.
Yeah. I would be very surprised if they came calling for me for that. But hey, it's local to Atlanta, so I'd always entertain that phone call.
Well, listen, it's been a pleasure having a conversation. It sounds like within 30 days, 45 days from now, we'll probably have one in person, which is great. And we really appreciate, everything that you do for us as the co-chair in Atlanta. So, Kris Douglas, who's the Vice President of Technology at Small Sliders. And if you don't know them, you better know them because they got the best sliders around. And they'll be at 1,000 units in the next few years. I think I got it right in 22 states building and, really fast growth. And he's really enabling it. So I appreciate your coming on TechBytes and having the conversation.
All right, no problem. I appreciate you having me. Love the conversations. Look forward to the next one.
This podcast is brought to you by the International Food and Beverage Technology Association. The IFBTA is the industry's voice of food service, hospitality, and retail technology, providing thought leadership as your single, impartial, and go-to resource. The IFBTA offers in-person and online communities to connect with your peers, the exchange, an all-encompassing global technology resource, and an industry-wide professional education and certification program. The bottom line is the IFBTA is your place to gather, learn, and share in conversations like the one we're having today. Thank you for joining us on this episode of TechBytes, powered by the IFBTA. I'm Rob Grimes, your host, and I look forward to taking our next bite of technology together.